All right, what's up, guys? Coach Braydon here with Look Like You Lift, and welcome to the Look Like You Lift 15 podcast, where we're going to teach you how to look like you lift in 15 minutes. Today, we have a really special guest, Chris Tutela with Tutela Training Systems. And today, we're going to be talking about how to get shredded. We're going to talk about fat loss. So before we get into it, Chris, why don't you give an introduction of who you are and what you do, man?
Well, Braydon, first off, thank you so much for having me on the show. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and really hope to deliver some value to your audience today. And so I've been a strength coach since 2006. As you mentioned, I'm the owner of Tutela Training Systems, which I opened back in 2012. We got a small gym over here in New Jersey where we have about 200 members in about 1,000 square feet or less. So we have a pretty jam-packed location, which we've been trying to expand for a while, but we're working on it still. But I also run an online coaching program for men who want to get lean, as well as retreats for men who want to not only transform their bodies, but transform their mindset, transform their lives in general.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
That's awesome, man. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So I guess we can talk about your approach to fat loss. Let's say that you are, I'm a brand new person who has, tried everything under the sun. What is the first thing that we're going to do to kind of get me on track to getting shredded?
Well, the first thing that we have to do is assess where you're at, right? Because a lot of times people will say, I've tried this diet, I've tried that diet, I've done this, I've done that. But we want to really take a look at, okay, well, what's going on with you? If you're trying all these diets, why aren't they working for you as an individual? So I want to know, what's your lifestyle look like? What does your sleep look like? What are you eating on a daily basis right now? How long have you been trying different diets where they haven't been working? Once I get more information about where the individual is, then we could start to lay the foundation for what they need as a specific individual, right? Because I think most people speak way too generally when it comes to nutrition and when it comes to training. That's the other thing. I want to see your activity level, right? Are you somebody who trains all day, every day? Are you somebody who barely trains? Because the advice might be, for one person, you have to eat a little bit less, but move a little bit more. And for another person, you might have to eat a little bit more, move a little bit less, right? Are you somebody who overtrains? So it really just depends on the individual. But then we get into the foundations. Once I know that information, then there are some general principles, which I could get into now if you want, or we could talk about that later. But that's basically how we start the whole process.
Yeah, that's awesome. So understanding the background is key to making things really customized to them moving forward. So what are your general principles that you go about with getting someone shredded?
Okay, so first off, I always go into the two overlooked components when it comes to fat loss, when it comes to health, when it comes to transformation in general. And number one is sleep. All right, because if most people have really shitty sleeping patterns, so I want to know, all right, what does your sleep look like? Because we could do a crash diet. We could do a crash course and start to try to lose as much fat as possible in a short amount of time. But the thing is that going to be sustainable? So my goal for each person that I work with is, can we create sustainability? So I want to first look at, how are you sleeping? All right. If you're sleeping 3 hours a night, okay, well, that's the first step, because I don't want to overwhelm someone with a million different things to do at once. I want to start by building the habits that are going to be able to last. So let's take a look at your sleep. What does your sleep look like? Okay, it's great, or most of the time it's shitty. So if it's shitty, what's the first step that you need to take to improve it? Do you need more sleep, or do we need to work on better quality sleep? So we look at that first. Now, the second thing is stress management. I want to know, from a 1 to 5, how stressed are you? Most people will say 4 or 5, and they're stressed out of their mind, ripping their hair out every day. So we got to work on that first, because if cortisol levels are chronically elevated and you're stressed out of your mind, it's going to be tough to lose body fat. It's going to be tough to keep it off. So my goal is to bring those cortisol levels down. So I want to take a look at your stress, and then how are we managing that? Do you have some type of method for managing stress? That could be spending more time outside. That could be journaling. That could be exercise. That could be meditation. It could be speaking to a therapist. It could be a lot of different things, but are you doing something to address it? Okay. So then from there, once we have that in check, then we get into the foundational principles of nutrition, which basically, eat real food. that's where I want to get to first. Before we start talking about macros, I think a lot of people jump into that. They jump into calories, they jump into macros. My goal is to make sure, are we eating the right foods consistently? Because again, if health is the top priority, in my opinion, that should be, we should prioritize health and longevity. If that's the goal, then are we getting the right nutrients in? Are you getting enough lean proteins? Are you getting enough fruits and vegetables? Are you getting enough fiber in your diet? Are you getting enough healthy fats? Before we start, because a lot of times, dude, we'll have to add a lot more food in because people have been starving themselves for decades trying to lose weight and go on these different crash diets, right? So my goal first is to make sure that the foundations of their diet are in check. All right. Then from there, I want to take a look at your training. What are your training protocols? Are you strength training? Are you training to build muscle? Because the amount of lean muscle mass, and of course, you know this, and maybe your listeners do too, but the amount of lean muscle mass that you have on your frame is what will ultimately dictate your metabolic rate. So more muscle could lead to a faster metabolic rate, which could lead to more fat burned over time. So I want to look at your training. Are you training 7 days a week, doing all this wacky boot camp stuff and, running and doing all that stuff, which is, hey, listen, if that's what you like, if that's your thing, great. But I also want to make sure that we're doing the right things in the gym to make sure that you're building lean muscle mass, because that's what's ultimately going to change body composition, right? From there, then I take a look at daily movement. Okay. Are you moving on a daily basis? Are you getting, what does your step count look like? Okay. Are you getting that in? Because if you're just sitting on the couch all day, we have to take that into account as well. If you're just training for an hour and then doing nothing for, you're training for an hour 3 days a week and then doing nothing the other 4 days, okay, we have to consider that. Maybe we have to increase your movement. And then finally, I want to look at your recovery. Okay. Because if you're putting all this training in and you're dieting and you're doing all these things, are you recovering from the work that you're doing? And that starts with your sleep. So it kind of goes back to that. So when we look at the foundational steps here, that's the pyramid, if you will, that I like to build and really zone in on for my clients.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you pretty much hit on every single point, like literally in 4 minutes, people can just take those tips and they'll make incredible progress right off the bat.
You told me I had 15 minutes, man. I want to get it all out there.
I love it. No, that's great. So I want to talk more about you mentioned we want to try to get them to eat more and train less. Can you expound a little bit more on that and how that works for long-term fat loss?
Absolutely. Well, first off, that's for some people, right? Sure. Some people might have to eat. It depends on the individual, right? And what they're currently doing. But, there's a lot of people, like let's look at chronic dieters, right? People that are always in this drastic calorie deficit. They're eating like 1,200 calories a day and they're starving themselves. And the thing is, when you do that, you end up losing muscle mass. Our cortisol levels are chronically elevated because the body is stressed out because of this drastic calorie deficit that they've been in for so long. And so the combination of elevated cortisol levels, a loss of muscle mass, all of a sudden now the body's hormones start to change, right? And if it's a male, you might start to see the testosterone levels plummet. Cortisol levels are elevated. It's very hard to build muscle and lose fat and achieve an ideal body composition if you're in that state. So when someone comes to me and they fit that description, the first thing that I want to do is add some more food in, because again, like I mentioned, the amount of lean muscle mass on your frame is what will help dictate your metabolic rate. So if we are going to make some progress, we need to focus on getting more calories in. And it's funny because I'm sure you know this too, as a coach, oddly enough, once you start adding more calories in, you start to see them drop more body fat faster, once they get, a couple weeks into it. And everybody's always terrified to do that, right? They're like, no, I can't have more food. I want to lose fat. This doesn't make sense. But then you make those changes. And then also look at it this way. If your calories are so low all the time, then you don't have any room to work with. What are we going to do? We're going to starve you to death, right? Because then you're just going to start wasting away. So we actually have to bring those calories back up, get you more. And from a nutrient standpoint, a micronutrient standpoint, hey, are your cells healthy? Are we getting enough vitamins and minerals and antioxidants in through the food that you're eating? Because if you're barely eating, the chances are you're probably not getting enough on the micronutrient profile either. So that's why we want to load up with some of that stuff for some people. Bring your numbers up. So then we have the room to come back down and start cutting calories if we have to.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because, we understand at the base of like the most important principle when it comes to fat loss is an energy deficit. But at the same time, there's a lot of people on one side who say that the only thing that matters is a deficit. Well, based on that logic, you should just keep cutting calories or you should just continue adding in more cardio. But in reality, it's actually doing more damage over in the long term. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. So I want to talk more about, sleep and stress, because you mentioned that managing sleep and stress is going to be huge for not only your overall well-being, but also for shredding fat. So could you give some tips on what we can implement right away to improve our sleep and to help us manage stress?
Totally. First off, as far as sleep goes, cut off electronics. I always say an hour before bed, but if that's unrealistic for some people, let's take baby steps, right? If it's 15 minutes, if it's 30 minutes, whatever you're willing to do. If you're listening to this show right now, the first step is to cut off your screen time and electronics before bed, at least 15 minutes, ideally an hour, but you could work your way towards that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So once you do that, dim the lights, start to relax a little bit and have a little bit of an evening routine. A lot of times people wake up and they have crappy sleep because they're waking up and thinking about, okay, I have to do this tomorrow. I have to do that. I have to do this. I have this deadline to meet. So I always suggest do a brain dump before you go to bed. Get everything here out of your head and onto a piece of paper. So we have structure, a plan of action. So we know what to attack the next day, the next week. So you have that. And now it's out of your head and it's not going to wake you up in the middle of the night, right? Get that stuff out of your mind. Another thing you could do is take a cold shower. Part of an evening routine that you could do is, a lot of people think take a hot shower, but that brings your body temperature up. And now it's harder to sleep, right? How many times have you been tossing and turning when it's hot out, you can't fall asleep, right? So bring your core temperature down by taking a cold shower before bed. Keep the lights dim, start to relax, and then keep your room cold and dark. No TV, no cell phones, no alarm clocks with the glowing digital numbers. Make sure the room is dark, get blackout curtains. Even the street lights will affect your sleep. Okay, you're not going to get into that the deeper sleep cycles as you go through a good night's sleep if there's lights coming in, even if it doesn't wake you up. Okay, so keep the room cold and dark, bring your body temperature down, and try to cut off the electronics before bed. And I'm sorry, you asked another question about stress, right?
Yeah, but real quick, you're like my doppelganger because everything that you just said is what I've been preaching for years. So this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk more about, I mean, the things that you just talked about with improving your sleep are also going to improve your stress, but what are some of along with the brain dump, what are some of the other things that we can start working on to help with stress?
Totally. So I think one of the things that people have to realize, and maybe 2020 helped with this, and being locked down, over here in New Jersey, New York, a couple of states were pretty damn crazy for a long time. Mm-hmm. But spending more time outside in natural sunlight, get more vitamin D, get around the beach, get around the trees, get in the grass, get back to our natural roots, because being outside more is going to help calm you. Okay. Now, and it's been shown to bring down cortisol levels the more time you spend outside, right? But another thing is to make sure that you are more proactive versus reactive over the course of a day, right? We got these phones, we got emails, we got text messages coming in, we got phone calls coming in, social media updates. So turn all of your notifications off. There's no need to get updated when friggin' John Smith is going live on Facebook. Who gives a shit? Turn that off, no notifications, and schedule the time to go check your phones. Schedule the time to check your text. Don't just wake up, roll over, and look at your phone the first thing in the morning, because now all of a sudden, instead of being proactive and creating a plan, whether it's meal prepping or going to the gym or focusing on you, doing some of the stuff we talked about earlier, now we're just reacting to everybody else's bullshit. We're responding to text messages, we're responding to emails, putting out fires. You're in this reactive state all the time. And now we never really got any productive work done. And you never really spent the time with the people that you want to spend time with because you're distracted all the time. So you'll actually get more done in less time by time blocking and planning when you're going to check your phone. I think that's one of the biggest things. And also, no need to watch the news 24/7. No need to scroll through Facebook, as like I said earlier. But if you're scrolling through all day and refreshing email and doing all that stuff, it's going to stress you out. So try to keep your phone off at, schedule times where you have your phone, you're completely disconnected from it. You have it off, you put it on airplane mode, and especially in the evening.
That's powerful, man. There's a lot of overlap there. I mean, you said that, one really good way to relieve stress is getting outside more. Well, what can you do outside? You can walk more. Well, that's going to increase your daily activity, which is going to just help with your weight loss even more. So there's a lot of overlaps with all the tips that you just mentioned. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, so Chris, what is the best way for people to get in contact with you, whether they're in the Jersey area that want to check out your gym or they want to check out your coaching?
Absolutely. So I'm most active on Instagram. So it's at Chris, CHRIS _Tutela, TUTELA. You could also head over to christutela.com and you'll find my podcast, which is the Iron Life podcast. You could also see the application that I have for online coaching or to join a weekend retreat with me. So that's christutela.com.
Perfect, man. We'll have all that information in the description. Make sure that you guys like, share, comment, subscribe, and make sure that you check out Chris's website and his Instagram page, and we'll see you in the next episode.